Hey guys, it's Jane. It's Saturday morning. I didn't quite get here yesterday. It's school holidays and, the kids are around, but they're not here right now. So while I have some time, let's see if we can get this done. I actually had a really good reading week. I finished 5 books, so let's just jump right in. I'm not going to have time to talk about anything at great length because, as I said, I'm watching the clock over there and I've got to get this done before the kids get back. But let's see how we go. The first book that I finished this week was Wrath by Gwynne. This is the 4th and final of his The Faithful and the Fallen series, which is a very enjoyable epic high fantasy series in the mould of Lord of the Rings. There is everything pretty much in this story. There is angels and demons and wizards and giants and pirates and swordplay and there's people with special gifts and magical objects and so many tropes going on, but it was really well done, and it is a complete series. You don't get to the end of the last book and go, and now what, George R.R. Martin? That doesn't happen because it's all written. So I can encourage anybody who likes a good fantasy sword and sorcery sort of book to have a look at that one. After I finished Wrath, I started in on my Girls' Own reading sort of drama that I said that I wanted to get into last week. So the first book that I read was Emma Newman's Brothers' Ruin. This is the beginning of a brand new series for her. This is a gaslight fantasy set in an alternate Victorian England where there is magic. Certain people have magical abilities, but if you have a magical ability, you basically become a ward of the state. You can't marry, you can't have any job except for working for the government, and you're rich and your family is well off, but you kind of become a slave. And our main character is a young woman from a lower middle class background whose brother is sickly, and at the moment she's kind of nursing him under a male pseudonym. She's been doing some work as a book illustrator and has just had a bit of a professional success with a really well-received volume just being published, and she also has a fiance, and life seems basically to be going well, except that her magic, she's finding it harder and harder to hide. She doesn't want to become one of these magic users for the state. And yes, the story ensues. This is very obviously feels like a setup for later volumes rather than a truly complete story in its own right. It's relatively short. It's actually sold for only about $4, the ebook, so it's priced like that as well. The next volume, I understand, is coming out in October. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to this series as it progresses. The next book that I read was Mishell Baker's Phantom Pains. This is the second book in the Arcadia Project series after last year's Borderline, which was one of my favourite books of last year. This was one of my most anticipated reads for 2017, and I have to say it did not disappoint on any level. It's a sort of urban fantasy, I guess. It's set now in sort of LA, in amongst the sort of film world, but it's also set at the intersection between the human world and the fae world. And the Arcadia Project is this kind of treaty organisation of border agents who police the gates between our world and the fae world. All the people who work for the Arcadia Project are people with psychiatric illnesses, because there is something particular about having mental health issues which makes you attuned in some special way. And so almost all of the important human characters in these stories have some version of mental illness. There's one character in particular who has a kind of medium-sized role in this, who's schizophrenic. He hears voices and stuff, but it turns out that at least part of that is actually him being possessed by these wraiths from the Fae world, and his experience in dealing with shutting out auditory hallucinations actually allows him to fight off this possession in a way that other people don't. And so it's kind of becomes a strength. And that is the same for a number of different characters in these stories, that their weaknesses and their strengths are the same thing. And it's just an amazingly imaginative and creative way of dealing with this stuff, and I really, really enjoyed it. Our main character has borderline personality disorder, which is something which is explained in the first book, probably more clearly than in this one. But at the end of the first book, she's actually kicked off the Arcadia project because everything went kabang at the end of that book. Even though she, saved the world, things fell down, and so she got kicked out. 4 months later, she's been working as a production assistant, I think, and there's some really great humour involved in her role as production assistant and her having to deal with all these kind of unmanageable Hollywood people. But now 4 months later, she's been called back in to help out in a small way initially with some other stuff hangover from this previous events from the last book, and ends up being drawn back into Arcadia Project Matters. It's a very enjoyable read. Mishell Barrick is becoming one of my favourite authors. I really, really enjoyed this book. The next book I wanted to like more than that, end up actually liking. It's an Australian crime fiction novel called Sharpshooter by Marianne Delacourt. It's not terrible, but it just wasn't for me. It's this 20-something girl who is down on her luck, broke, living back with her parents, out of work, but has this special talent of being able to see people's auras. And in the course of this story, she gets a bit more training in this and then ends up being able to use that professionally. And it's her beginnings of working as a kind of aura reading investigator / body language expert, and gets caught up in something a bit nasty. The actual overarching theme of this stuff sounds really interesting, sounds like it could be a lot of fun. I just didn't like Tara Sharp, who's the main character. Even though she's supposedly broke, she's quite snobby. There's a few sections that are set in less Tony parts of the city, and it's really quite classist and nasty, some of the things that it sort of assumes. So yes, and there's this broke girl who has all these designer handbags and designer outfits in her closet, and no, it wasn't for me. But for anybody else, it may be much more enjoyable. The final book that I finished was Sunshine by Robert McKinley. This is one of the books I got out of that Humble bundle. On the Galactic Suburbia podcast, I heard the girls talking about the contents of this bundle. One of the people said that Robert McKinley was one of the authors that they were really looking forward to reading, and that they thought that she was really underrated. So I thought I'd give her a try first, and let me tell you, I really enjoyed this book. Sunshine is a vampire story, and I know not everybody digs them, but I do have a soft spot for the old vampire story, and this was a good one. Sunshine, our central character, is a 20-something girl who works as a baker in her family coffee house, and is very happy. She works hard, she works long hours. She's got a boyfriend who's a cook and an ex sort of motorcycle gang thug, but now is a cook and a nice guy. And She kind of fights with her mum but gets on well with her stepdad, and everything basically seems good in her world when one night she is abducted by vampires. They take her, don't kill her straight away, which is initially the thing that surprises her the most. They take her and they chain her to the wall in this creepy, decrepit old mansion. And then she realizes that there is somebody else chained to the wall near her, and it is another vampire. But the first lot of vampires seem to kind of be afraid of this other vampire, and the other chained vampire and she kind of join forces to escape, which is this very uncomfortable, strange thing. But it turns out they need both of their kind of skill sets to be able to get away, and they form an alliance. It turns out that Sunshine actually comes from a magic handling family, and even though she's never really used it, she has some ability with magic, and together with that and the vampire's sort of super speed and strength and whatever, they can get out of this situation. That is kind of the very beginning. But of course, then she's like, after 2 days being held by these vampires and then they break away, but her life is never the same again. And the rest of the story is kind of dealing with the aftermath of this. Very enjoyable read, and I'm looking forward to getting into some more Robin McKinley. I think there's at least one more book of hers in that Humble Bundle. So that is what I finished this week. The book that I've just started is another one of the Humble Bundle books. It's Blacklight by Elizabeth Hand. I haven't really read enough of that to know what it's about. I probably really need to stop talking because it's nearly time and they're going to be back. So I'd love to hear what you guys are reading. If any of you have read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought about it. I probably won't be here next week. It's Easter next weekend, and on Friday I'll be at church, and then there's lots of stuff going on over the weekend. So I will catch up with you sometime on the other side of Easter. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.